Good morning, guys. It's 29 minutes past midnight here in South Africa. It's the 10th of August, and we're now going to move on to part 2 of our tutorial on Blazor.net, which include the entity framework and SQL Server. In part 1, we covered the basic concepts in Blazor, which is this bind. Okay, this bind allows you to bind a server-side variable. Let's put it that way. You can bind a server-side variable, and that server-side variable will display on the form without having any JavaScript in between this. And this is the onBlur event, and this onBlur event kicks off a function in the backend which does check validation. This is the form control class that gives us the HTML5 bootstrap ability. Okay, and by adding this inherits here with a backend code base, which is this file here, this file or this class inherits component base, and when you inherit component base, you have to add this method in here with this return type. This gives us the ability to move our code or all our complex code into its own separate class file. However, it doesn't limit you from adding code the way Blazor was designed, where you can have your C# and your HTML in one file, which is this ability. There's times when you need it and there's times when you don't need it, and in some instances we don't need it now, so I suggest moving the code here. It's the way we come from the old school ASP.NET, that we had the code behind file and a front-end UI file, so that gives us this ability. Okay, and as you can see, the file has been the form has grown quite a bit from where we left off, and I added the other fields, and I made mention that we'll fix the button. And how we fix the button, the look and feel of the button from the previous video, is we add this class. This class comes standard with the bootstrap. This comes standard with bootstrap, so you just need to add it in here. There's nothing for you to do, it's already included in the framework, and you'll see that it has the look and feel of bootstrap. Let this thing kick off. It's loading up. If you go to the My Information page, this is how the page looks now. Okay, and I've styled this with a label, and there's the bootstrap button that I'm talking about. So if I just go here, using this property or this class equals to btn space btn primary space btn lg space btn block, you will get this look and feel. Okay, then I added the validation, and I added my own pattern in the validation. Okay, and I'll just show you how it works. So now this is how it works. So when you press the button, it says not all mandatory fields have been filled in, please check above, and then it kicked off a validation for each control that's mandatory. Okay, then when you type in, it interactively resets the validator. Okay, and it continues like that. Now the thing with this validation, when you do your own custom validation in Blazor, you'll end up with code like this, where you've got a validate function, and then you've got to validate each control with this if statement. And how this validator is working is, if you go to this control, which is first name, right? I've got the first name here. I have a label in here that's bound to a class file. So this is the beauty of Blazor, and this is where Blazor becomes quite powerful. Is I've got this class here saying at validation.css, first name validation.css. So this is the beauty of Blazor, where you can have a label, or any control for that matter, bound directly to a complex type. So the class for this label is now currently validation.firstName validation CSS, right? If I show you validation, here, okay, here it is. So I created my own class called user information validation, and I said for the first name we'll have a CSS type, first name validation CSS. For surname there'll be surname error validation CSS, and it continues. So I created a property for each control that has CSS, and then I set them all to dnone. Dnone is your CSS bootstrap style. So in HTML5 bootstrap there is something called dnone. You don't have to do anything, it's already in your CSS here. You'll find the CSS here, and you'll find the bootstrap in here. And inside the bootstrap.min, if you look for d-none, you'll find it here. Okay, they made this file go this way. Okay, and all dnone does is it makes the control invisible. Back out this file now, user information validation. I'm setting everything to dnone, okay, and then I got a global error CSS. So here at this label, validation.css is dnone, and then when I do the validation at this page here, this file, when something is invalid, for example first name is invalid, I say validation.firstName validation.css is equal to error label. And if you go into my site CSS, you'll find error label in here. Okay, I created this style in the CSS inside here. So the thing about this is it's a lot of code, and you got to handle the second part is when you kick off when something is invalid and you kick off it on the page, and you kick it off on the page, you want to interactively get the validator to not show again after you fill out the field. So then you have to have a second function to control that as well. So it looks very clunky. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just think that it depends on the circumstances. So I'll show you a more advanced validation and how to build that, okay, as opposed to this one. So we'll move all those pages off the way now, and we'll start with the login. Just got some code over here which we'll just plug in for the login page. Okay, and we'll just do that. So we've got an email address field and we've got a password field. So this email, this password, then I think we'll need a button. I think we'll just borrow the button from this other page called sign up. Input type is equal to submit. Okay, we'll borrow that. Okay, cool. So we'll just change this to login. Okay, so we have an email, we have a password, right? This is the login page, and I just want to put it into the menu system so we can access it. It needs a route. So now check if that syntax is correct. Yes, it looks correct. So we'll take that route and we go down to the menu system. So you'll find it on the shared. Oops, login. Login. So let's check if we can access the login page before we move on to the concept. Okay, we have one bug. What's this thing's problem? Error list. It's the Visual Studio 2022 preview is not able to take me to the error. It's creating some drama in my life here. So we don't need any of this now, because we're going to move on to a more advanced concept for forms. So we'll take all this out. So it built. There we are. There's our login page. Okay, it's a skeleton at the moment. Okay, cool. So now you can see there's no validation now, right? So we're going to move on to this concept called the data annotations validator, which I have in the sign up page, and I'm going to move it across to the login page. So the data annotations validator. So our login page now needs to inherit component base. We'll use the IntelliSense to fix that up. Okay, and component base needs to return. I'll borrow some code from here now. Let's take this to the login page, login base, bang. And we take this out, and that's what it's requiring. It's requiring the return type of base.initialized, and then our login page will inherit that. But first things first, we need to go here, not there, to the login.base. Let's move this together, and we need to change this namespace to login base. Then we go here and say inherits. Login base.login base. Now when we do that, we have all the code available to the UI that's on login base, including all the properties, complex types, etc. So login base has that. We have the email address and the input to email that. That's all cool now, but we're missing the important thing. So in data, I decided that I'd like to keep it inside data. Inside data, I created another folder called model entities, and model entities requires a class or an entity that models the user interface. Okay, so we require a complex type or an entity that models the user interface login, right? So we go here and we say new class. Okay, and we'll call this class login entity, and I'll say UI entity to be specific here for the purpose of learning. Login UI entity. Okay. Now login UI entity will have a property called public string. I like that IntelliSense come up. Did it come up? Yeah, cool, but it's not username, it's email address. It was a good try from the IntelliSense. Get set. Cool. The IntelliSense in Visual Studio 2022 is quite advanced. It's able to understand what you're doing. It has some kind of AI in it, and it helps you with your code completion much better than what I've seen in any other Visual Studio from the previous versions of the other Visual Studios. That's 2019 all the way down to 2000 and I think we used 2003 Visual Studio. We've come a long way in the .NET space. So I just want to look at a code example now. Here's the sign up entity here. So what we need now is we need this field here. We need this library. We need to include this package. So that is the important thing. You need this package. What is it saying? No, we're using this. Okay, we're about to use it. And then on this property, okay, we're gonna need this. Okay, these two attributes required, which is having a message saying email address is required, and we're having an email address again, which when you put this, it will validate initializes a new instance of the system component model data annotations email address attributes, and then it's got a validator is valid. So in the framework, using the data annotations validator, it's going to validate the email address for you just by putting the attributes onto the property like that. And the same applies for the password. I just want to take the right. Okay, awesome. So that is awesome now. Okay, we don't need any of these. We just need using system.componentModel.data annotations, using system.componentModel.data annotations. We now have email address required. Please enter a valid email address. These two attributes and an attribute for password. You go to the login page, okay, and you create an edit form, just like that, edit form, okay. And we're going to reference this other page because I've done it here already, which is the sign up. So I have to copy this code across. And then the model is the login UI entity. Let's fix this up. Yes, we want to use that. And on a valid submit, when it's a valid, we will go to the login step. So in the login base, now we need to take all this code and drop it inside here. That's the first step to refactoring this this code. Okay, that's indented, that's indented, that's indented. Okay, then back at my example, I'm going to copy this and see if it will work. So it's no longer input now, it's input text, because we're using an edit form model. So it's input text, gave it an ID, and it's no longer bind, it's bind value. Okay, and then the bind value is the value to this login UI entity, which is that complex type that we created here. So if I say login UI entity dot, what happened there? Hi, what's going on? Why is it not accessible? Okay, cool. So it's more than just a question of using it here. We don't need it there. We need it in our base class of the page, which is here. We need to declare it here, login UI entity, which has two properties, email address and password. It's inheriting from the data annotations component model, and it's having these attributes. Okay, then we go to the login. So we go login dot email address. So the control input text email address with a bind value has the model that represents this UI form, which I call login UI entity, this property dot email address, and I'll do the same for the password. So now it's important to have this, which will help the validation display. It's inside this control, inside this div. Let's see if I got it right. Validation message 4. Okay. Which will be the login entity dot email address. So the validation is for the login entity, which represents this model here, dot email address. Okay, and we do the same. Can I just copy this? We'll go to standard control. So if it's a valid form, it's going to go to the login, which I put a breakpoint on. Yes, I did. So let's see what happens. Wow. So when that happens, when you get an unhandled exception here, you press F12 on your keyboard and you'll get the error out here on the DevTools. Edit form requires a model parameter or an edit context parameter. Please provide one of these. Edit form requires either a model parameter or an edit context. What are we talking about? I gave you the model. Just check some other code bases here. Login entity on valid submit data annotations. What's the drama? What's the drama? Tell me what's going on here. My login page is using this entity, same as how I built this one. This is my code, passed it on there, bind value. Let's eliminate this piece of code here, just to eliminate what the error could be. Let's eliminate this as well, and let's eliminate this as well. Let's eliminate everything. So we start with a fresh file. Edit form requires either a model parameter or an edit context. On initialize async. This is the first method when the page is loaded up. We will instantiate this login UI entity. See, that's the IntelliSense. It's quite smart. Visual Studio 2022. It's very advanced. Okay, let's hope this works. I'm quite confident it's going to work. Cool. Just got one syntax. We will fix that syntax now. Like now. There's it here. Log in. Okay. So we need a button to make sure we need a button now, so we can test this validator is kicking off, and this should come out of this comment as well. And now we're going to look and see how the action goes. Log in. It's taking the cache from the browser, saved passwords. Take this out, my test cases. Wow, did you see that, guys? It kicked in when I press. Oh, that's even kicking in as well. That's even better. So it does work. It works awesomely. How's that? Awesomely. See, let's just review what I did here. I gave it a standard input type of password. Okay. And I bound it using the bind. I bind it or bound it to the complex type that models this user interface, its properties, password. Okay, if you go here, login UI entity, we've got two properties. One is password, one is email address. Right, email address has the attribute please enter a valid email address, and password has the required attribute please enter your password. Right, so back to the login. we added a validation message. We added a validation message here, which says validation message for, which has this event login UI entity.password and login UI entity.email address wrapped inside this label, and that's wrapped inside this label. Right, I wonder if you could just say label class is equal to error label and take it out from this label. Okay, let's kick this off and see what happens. Need to take out the saved ones. Look, it's working. It's working beautifully. Wow, look at that. And notice it highlights the text box in red. So it says please enter your email address. Please enter your password. And if you type in invalid email address, if you press tab, it says please enter a valid email address. Oh wow, I saw something that I was interested in. This is now kicking in. But it doesn't work so great. Okay, that's awesome. It's working quite nicely. Now when we click login, where's this breakpoint? Okay, well, we need to validate the page. There's the page. That's the email address, my test case. Let's put test 123. Click login, and there, because the page is valid, it's now come into the login. And I will write the code to handle the login authentication. So I think I'm going to stop the tutorial at that point, because the point of this tutorial was to show you how to do a validation and how to move away from the simple type of validation which I did in the user information page, where you end up with all this code which is not necessary. This is not necessary anymore. And the second function here, which is the check validation, to make it interactive, so each time you type something and you tab off, it hides it away. You don't need that anymore. All you do is you use an edit form model. You create an entity that models the form, and on the entity you give it the attributes required error message and email error message. Well, you define your error message here, okay, and then you plug it in by saying input text, okay, for a text box, and then a bind value with the complex type dot the email address. And the same goes for password, with the complex type, the entity complex type dot the password. Okay, you should get it come up automatically on IntelliSense. And then you give it validation message for. This validation message is for the login UI entity dot password, and our class is error label. And this is a way for you to inject and get a hook into the data annotations validator, so that it can push the message out using this. It's kind of like a delegate. I call it a pointer too. Okay, so thanks for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe so that I can continue sharing my content. And I'm also thinking of giving a login page with a sign up page. Let me just show you what my sign up page looks like. I'm thinking of checking that code into GitHub, so that when you start your project, you have a base model to work off. This is my sign up page here. Okay, and this is the browser doing that. Okay, it's using the same edit form model as well, and I have custom made this as well. Okay, and it's also doing custom validation to make sure that the password meets the minimum standard using a regular expression, and it checks whether the passwords match each other. Okay, so it's test 1 2 3 $. It's still not strong enough. Needs a capital T, and we can just copy and paste that. Okay, and if you click sign up, it's checking if this drop down list is clicked, this drop down list is selected or not. Okay, and if you click this icon, it hides it and shows it, which is better than having that one here. It didn't look so good, it didn't work so well. This is just simply using the style sheet and having an event on this image that changes it from dnone to normal password. Not dnone, from password to from a normal text box to a, let me show you what I'm talking about. On the sign up, yeah, toggle show password, and I've got a, on the toggle show password, so here's the icon I'm talking about. Okay, that icon, and I've got an event here. The event is toggle show password, and the class is show password icon. So if I go to the code behind, this is the event, and then the input type is changing. Yeah, so when I toggle on the image, it changes the input type. The input type is either going to be input or password, which is on the text box. So that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of Blazor. You can now manipulate your controls directly without having to put JavaScript anywhere, and that works very seamless and powerful. So that's how that works. Okay, cool. So if I get 1,000 subscribers, then I'll share my IP with you guys, where you'll have a base framework to work off, which has your login and sign up, and this sign up sends out an email with a verification code. So let me just show you that it's fully functional stuff. Okay, so there's a sign up keys table and a user credentials table, and if I type in, well, we've got the password typed in already, and if I say he's a normal user and I hit sign up, can you see it's got a animation here, and it moves to step 2. And step 2, if I check here, it's got the key now in the database. Okay, and account status is 1 at the moment, because 1 means you're not verified. If I take this key here, we'll do the negative test case. It says it doesn't look right, it's not valid. Try another one, still not valid. Then we do this one, which is the valid one. Say submit, and it says welcome, or it takes you to the index page, ICE 911. Okay, and just to show you how that looks while we're on it, if you go to your index page, I've moved it up in here. Okay, I'm using user credentials, okay, which is my complex type that models the user credentials. And if you go into the startup, you got to add your user credentials to scope. So you say services.add scope user credentials, so that it becomes a singleton throughout the application. Okay, so I need to store the user credentials like how we used to do in the old days. We had a session variable. This is similar to that. So you come back here and I'm saying, okay, I use the word inject. You use the word inject, user credentials. The sign up page sets up the user credentials. And then you say, okay, if the user credentials is account type 1, he's a normal user, then I'm going to load up the normal user, what he sees on the index page. If the account type is 2, he's from emergency services, it loads up the emergency services. And that's just a control here that I created, and a control here. Okay, and then it loads it up depending on your account type and your role base. I think that's about it for today. Just subscribe, and when I get to 1,000 users, I should be ready to give you a boilerplate template you can download from GitHub that has the sign up and a login for you and a base framework to work off, so you can just not worry about login and sign up and just start coding, because it took me a few days to get this to work, and I'll save you that time. I'm looking for 1,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.